So, made a little bit of color and just made it into a pendant. I'm going to make a little more and make it into a rod. And then we'll use it in some kind of accent. Or no. How about like a piece of 9.2 or 10 mil or 12 mil tubing? Just here's everything. Here, I'm going to even put down some fuming before I blow the shape. That's going to bake it in further. Because every time the heat's exposed to the glass, and especially the oxygen, the whiter the silver becomes. No, that should do. Okay, this is cold. It was sitting on the floor, so start way out here. Lots of yellow flame. Because that yellow flame introduced the radiant heat. I didn't have a problem with the crack. And that's my little mouthpiece end. We'll do the same thing with this one. The way the flame bathes over the glass, when it's even, it's carried away the stress. When it's all jaggedy, the glow that's sticking to the flame, or the flame that's sticking to the glass, you can see that it's still carrying off stress when there's a lot of gaps and so forth. Once the way the orange collects around it and is even, then your stresses are pretty much gone. That ought to do. So what's a rod of color cost around here? Anybody buy color rod? Just like the standard cheap stuff like caramel. Anyhow, how much? Well, it depends on what your hourly wage is worth, but sometimes mixing your own color is not such a bad call. It gives you something that's unique. And this fella from Japan was photographing water as it froze, and he would subject the water to all types of different environments, different mental attitudes, like you curse this jug of water over and over again, write bad things on a piece of paper and hang it on that in alchemy style. And his crystals that formed on the ones that had blessings and good hopes were phenomenal crystals. And the ones that had the negative were ugly crystals, for real. Anyhow, he pulls that off some way. And maybe it's in that area that we can define around us that we don't know how we do it. But okay, there's very little difference between water freezing at 32 degrees or where our glass goes from being at 2,000 degrees to 1,500 to 1,400 to 12, and it just froze. It's back there at 14. So the crystals aren't formed with water here or the glass, but the metal is a crystalline structure. So already I've possibly put some of my energy into the freezing of that. And I hope they're a little smiley. There you go. Thanks, Steve. I always forget his name. That's not it. That's it. So some more silver on the outside. Oh, I used to file up everything and add it to clear glass. So what gave me the idea? 1972, I was still working a day job at a shop that I did heat treatment on different metal things. And I one day had to run a surface grinder that was taking something like a 10,000th of an inch off of this copper block. And I'm running that, and I'm saving up some of the filings, and just asked the foreman, can I take some of those home and try to mix them in glass, because I was always talking about what I was doing at Chuck's. And I show up at Chuck's with a lunchbox full of copper filings. I didn't tell him how many I was going to take. Anyhow, we took like a spoonful and dropped it down in a tube, made it stick to the inside, and started blending it up, and was actually expecting to get goldstone. But borosilicate melts or works at a temperature above the melting point of copper. So instead of encasing all those little pieces of copper, we melted them and oxidized them, and we made a glass that was the copper red that I passed around the room. The same type of color, anyhow. It wasn't identical, but that's pretty good. That doesn't have too many bubbles in it. Anyhow, we made copper red, and while we were doing it, we ran out of propane, so our flame went from being a bit reducing to shorter and bluer and shorter and bluer. And the last rod we pulled out was red at this end, and the final end went through the real oxidizing flame, and it was transparent green. Whoa. Didn't know what it was. Phases of the moon. I was not that in touch with the chemistry of the flame. Don't know how it happened at first. And then finally, Bondu actually explained, oh, you went from an reducing flame to an oxidizing flame. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what happened. But I didn't know the, pardon? Bondu Dunham. When I told him this little story about how it went from red to green. I learned more about chemistry that day. Oh, another thing I started to say about how different colors bubble. Sometimes by adding more oxygen, it keeps the oxides in the glass and they don't bubble out. So some things, when you find that you've got to turn up the oxygen to get your piece not to bubble so severely. It's because part of the environment around it's not demanding oxygen out there. It's always trying to equalize. So that equalization is sometimes done just right here. So there's a watercolor on the end of the blow tube now. And this is probably the best way to create some kind of really neat looking patterns that are going to be random. So the thing about blowing a bubble through a piece of glass, one side might stretch, one side might be a little hotter. So I keep trying to put the hotter one to the bottom. So what's going on is if I just stand here and hold this and not keep it going round and round, air comes up and touches that and it gets heated and it wraps around it and starts a laminar flow, and it's pulling the air up below it. The air over here is not touching this glass. It's getting diverted by that laminar flow that's created down here at the bottom. Hot air is always coming up, so if I don't keep a piece going around and round, then it's going to get a chill spot. And if I'm blowing on a piece, if it's got a chill spot, that's the part that freezes. Sometimes you want to freeze that thinner area. And if you keep turning what you want to stretch to the upper side, that's how it's going to move. It's going to stretch on the upper side. So there's a split second where if I come out of the flame and blow this, actually the bubble will go to the bottom towards gravity. That's because the glass is moving that way and it's still that hot. But as soon as it starts to equalize in temperature, the area on top is going to become the hot spot. So if I blow it that quick, yeah, I might get movement down here because that glass is being pulled more by gravity. Does that make any sense? But wait that half a second, equalize a little bit, and now it's going to go to the hottest part. Glass likes to flow to the hottest place. So most of the bubbles are pretty small now. Got one. You don't want to leave that little bit of glass on the end that has tungsten on it, or that jumped up in the air. Tungsten will leave a blemish on the surface that'll shrink at a different rate than all the rest of the glass. It'll cause it to have a pucker. So if you're going to rework it, you got to make sure that tungsten part cleans off. First fireman comes along, make a puddle here. That can soak in for a minute. There's a big bubble I didn't see. Must be pretty far inside. And this is going to be just a little jar like the one I got my gold in and silver in. Now, I make a cold seal this way. I'll tend to point my rod and then I'm going to flatten the surface, and that's going to form a skin. I'm going to get it hot one more time, and then I'm going to flatten that surface just with a touch, and then I'll push down and pull back. And I even want my little chunk of glass a little bit off center, thicker on one side. Because when I go to take my cold seal apart, I'm going to hit that thicker spot with the flame and cause it to heat just on one side, and I'll feel a little tick in my hand. You might even hear it click all the way across the room. Cough in the flame. Oh yeah. So I'm setting up the top of the bottle. I'm just kind of feeding this piece of punny tube down, providing a little extra glass. try to get it kind of level across the top before I get ready to flame cut it. Flame cut and fire cut are a little bit different. Flame cut's on a hollow tube and you blow and pull. Okay, I gotta wait for that to lose some of its color. Otherwise, I'll go too far into the other area. I don't want to do that. I just want this new glass I'm heating up to be the glass that moves. And that'll be real easy to tear off after I hit my hardy board and flatten the bottom. So here I go. I shouldn't even went through the flame. I should have went out around it. Now I'm going to take that thickest part, kind of even make that flame hiss a little more, touch the thick side, and wait. And there's really no three-dimensional change there. So that chilling your cold seal and then pressing down, what happens is the molten glass squeezes through cracks that are formed when you push the glass down on there first that's already got a skin. And you'll get these little patches like the deal between the continents, the plates. I've got a nice concave bottom. This is where I can step in with a grabber tool. Always warm your tool. You don't want to warm it with that kind of flame. You want as soft and bushy as you can get, or a yellow flame if you're just gas on some tools. Have more people screw up my tools with the torch. So what I'm going to do is cap with my finger, same time the bubble goes in the flame, and it popped a hole. And I just go around and take that off. I want to trim that down some more. I use a really small flame. I'm going to heel this onto it. Get below that lip that I created when I first fire polished that bubble off. So tiny vessels just take a lot less time than making anything bigger. And where did I set that? I am not organized. Here we are. Time to work on organization, huh? Sometimes I like tools in different places. and figure out where I'm going to move things around to in a shop where it's just natural. And gravity right now, I'm letting that drop one way because it was high. I'm not going to level that anymore. Yeehaw. Super duper. Okay, so you can make that. Could have been made. That could have been a pipe stem. I could have added a big old wad of clear on the end and blown it again and again. And each one's a thinner mixture of that pattern, and then the next one be a thinner mixture again. Really looks good.